And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is going to be the beginning of the afternoon sessions, the conference sessions here for Dare to Be Great 2. And we have with us today keynote speaker Karima Holmes out of the Office of Unified Communications. She's the director there, and she's going to be doing a session on transformational leadership in ECCs. Thank you so much. We're honored to have you here to speak, and take it away.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you for having me. Hello, everyone, my family out there. So today I'm going to talk to you about transformative leadership. As a leader, how do you transform an agency that is in disarray or one that is perceived to be in disarray? Well, I have been in both of those positions as a leader. What I found was there was either a lack of transparency, a lack of public education, low morale, and sometimes all of the above. To be honest, you can't please everyone, but there is a formula to appease your customers, which are your callers, your executives, stakeholders, partners, and most importantly, your assets, your employees. You can't please everyone, but you can please the majority. This is accomplished by being honest, open, and dedicated to transforming your agency to the finest operations it could be. I am presenting to you today in our simulation lab here at DCOUC. It overlooks our main call floor. And with me today, I have behind me a class of call takers recently promoted to dispatchers. And in a few years, one of them may be up here as the OUC director. But you guys can settle down. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So for today, I will break it out into 4 quick talks. These are points I have always wrote on when managing and transforming an agency. You got the mission. I think we all know that the end goal of our profession is to get emergencies connected to us, get the information needed, disseminate that information, get it out to the first responders in an expeditious manner while simultaneously monitoring the safety of all those involved, from the caller, the call taker, our dispatchers, our first responders, and anyone in the scene. The second one is individual growth. As an individual, your cognitive and intellectual ability are key to running any program. So just as we focus on policy and procedure and programs, we must nurture ourselves to remain steadfast, intensive, and meaningful in our work. The third goal is relationships. This is internal and external. Because if you think about it, our industry touches every single human being on this planet, whether or not they call 911. There are processes and steps we take to help callers as well as bystanders, those responding, and even those not conscious of an emergency near them. Lastly, we have proper governance. There is some business aspect of our agencies. We run agencies that are unabridged, well-oiled mechanisms that not only have operative needs, but also budgetary and administrative pressures, and those must be addressed and handled. None of these points are in any order. They all carry the same weight. So let's get started. First, the mission. Within the first 8 months of arriving to OUC, there was the biggest to date threat to our agency. We had a 55-minute outage. No, I do not mean we had maybe admin lines still working, 311 was up, or text was available. No, our entire agency went black. As all of you guys are gasping, I will parenthetically add that it was a Saturday night in DC. Yep, perfect stew of disaster. So as I jumped in my car, wearing a pseudo pajama shirt, jeans, socks with slide-ons, I rushed to the center while dialing and receiving calls from the cavalry. One of those calls was with my 911 manager, Ed Washington. I told him I was already on the way to the center, and he said, well, don't go there. It's blacked out. We're all headed to the backup center. Ding! When an emergency happens, our brains are not high functioning. It's great to have smart people around and employees who aren't afraid to tell you the better way. All the way to the center, the backup center, I kept thinking about how I was going to get fired or die from the stress, or how many lives we were going to lose because of our failed mission. Well, long story short, I didn't die. I'm here. Or worse, I didn't get fired, and no one lost their lives as a result of the outage. We were lucky. I read that in architecture, form follows function. You don't go and build a building or a structure until you know what it's for. This is exactly the approach I had when entering directorship at a regional 911 center in Texas, and when I came to DC. First, I had to find out how these agencies were currently working. I already knew the function part, having the experience and the education, and gleaned that all PSAPs had the same end game and function. I didn't need to know that, but I did need to know how the form was in place to make these things happen. After figuring out the workings, I found out that they needed a leader. The previous leadership had begun the working of creating a work environment that would run a bit authoritarian, and it caused unhappiness. So my approach in Texas was to be their leader. They had the tools, the experience, and the public backing, but the leader was absent. My goal then was to represent them, and I did that by supporting and enhancing what they already were doing and developing myself to mold to their teams. Now, in DC, I found that they lacked some leadership, but also they lacked key resources. I'm not talking about money. After spending a great deal of my time talking to internal and external teams, I realized that employees had the tenure, the stamina, and the I want to do good mentality, but they were missing the continuous training in the workforce to support the extraordinarily high call volume and high profile calls. Once I figured that out, my approach was to be a little different from Texas. This time, it was to develop a new full training program that not only taught the call takers and dispatchers how to properly do their job, but also how to create a profession out of it and how to evolve with the industry. As our calls are in the last couple of years, they've morphed and changed in their dynamics. So for the mission, always keep the form and the function in mind. When making a transformative change, I did not simply do the pros and cons of a decision. I did a 4-pronged list. What is working and the approach is favorable, I kept it. What is working, but the approach Karima really didn't understand, I still kept it. What is working and the approach I did not understand, change. What is not working, but the approach is favorable, I changed. End goal, it must work for the mission. If it doesn't work for the mission, it must go. Now, number 2, which is probably the hardest, is individual growth. During that outage that I still may or may not be taking antacids for, I made a mental note of all the things I did not understand about our agency, our people, our operations, and anything that did not sit well with me. And I made a personal goal of guaranteeing, of guaranteeing that our next outage or our next big event, I would be more informed and I would need less from people to decide the approach or our solution. For instance, during this outage, I didn't really understand how our systems work. What system talks to what? In the middle of an emergency is when I was getting briefed on these systems. In direct response to that, now I not only meet with my CIO, but I also meet with the entire management team quarterly, and they brief me on all dealings IT, from what phone system transfer node is working or not working so well. The week before the CAD upgrade, I know all the responses and sequences. They brief me on vendor management and even the industry's new hottest gadgets. This has helped me as a professional and as a leader of a heavy technologically laden organization. Another individual growth point that I have been able to hone in this realization is that you should not conflate yourself to your job. This is a position. Whether or not Karima is the director of DCOUC, there will always be a 911 entity here. With that, I am conscious of the choices that I make. I think it's a terrible thing when a leader is in a position and they completely fit the agency to them and their personality. Then, as we all know, leaders change, they're uprooted, replaced more often than employees are. So you leave two groups in a bad place. Those tenured employees who decide to make the agency their full career workplace and the new leader coming in. Think about that. That's pretty selfish. Another individual item is ownership. During, which we are still in, our transformation at OUC, one of the hardest things to do when you are working on being better is when that hiccup happens. That call is blown or a call is not answered in the proper time, causing more harm to the situation, and the agency is to blame. As leaders, I have found that during these difficult times, the best approach is to own your part of the mess. And I do it in this order. I own the mess. We did it. We dropped the ball. It was an operator error. I explain why the mess. The call volume was high during that time. The call takers were on other emergencies, or the dispatcher inadvertently created a duplicate call because yada, yada, yada. Then you talk about what all you have in place to reduce the amount that mess happens again. We have safeguards in place that we are focusing on training verification of addresses in our next continuing dispatch education sessions. Or we have begun looking at technology that can better assist us in that realm. Now, this does not always put out the fire, but it is honest and it's understandable by rational people. Before I jump to the next topic, just remember these key things when leading in a transformative way about yourself. Learn it's okay to have crazy problems come your way and not have the solutions right away. I mean, the problem is crazy and no one else has figured out a solution. Every problem does not need full attention. Some do not need attention instantly. It is solved better when you have given yourself some time to think deep. I've noticed that when I have time to ponder over the problem, the privilege that I have sometimes, I get a better remedy, or I find that the problem is not as crazy as I initially thought. Also, work smarter. You cannot do it all. You don't have to. No one can. Also, remove any personal barriers you have before walking in a room or a situation, and you know what your personal barriers are. Another good one, be okay with losing. But when you do lose, make sure to channel your energy in an intelligent direction. Just as Tom Hanks says in one of my favorite movies, A League of Their Own, there's no crying in baseball. But you can acquiesce to the adverse solution given, which I always call not Karima's choice. You can find a way to insert your wants into the new idea. Not only allow yourself to be confined by accolades, attempt to take some risk. There is a lot of growth. And lastly, but most importantly, it is okay to be nice and forgiving to yourself. I think we are too hard on ourselves sometimes. All right. Third point, relationships. There is no doubt that as a leader, and especially a leader looking to transform an agency, you must cultivate relationships. I know you are already picturing that one person that you must deal with from time to time, yet they are not the best to have a sensible conversation with. If you don't know who that person is, then I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you are probably, okay, that's a whole other keynote for a whole other day. When I had braces, I would hate the day that I had to go and get them tightened because I would have a headache for 2 days and they already curb your appetite. So then I had this lingering headache for hunger. But once my orthodontist told me to take the painkiller before I got to the chair to get them tightened. Don't wait for the headache to come. So if you have not been able to wiggle your way out of that difficult person or conversation, the best approach is to start off building trust and relationships before the headache starts. As my grandma used to say, nip it in the bud. Now, this is done by building blocks. The building block A, we have already discussed, which is individual growth. If you are not mature enough to garner a relationship at this level, don't waste anyone's time. And that means if you are still shaken up when someone points out your faults or disagrees with you, then go back to number 2 and work on yourself. Building block B. You have got to be confident in your approach and what you want. Let me rephrase that. Not what you want alone, but what you need for the mission. Once you have aligned, number 1, the mission, and number 2, your individual growth, then number 3, relationships are easier. When we as leaders are sharp enough to make sure that we are molding ourselves to match our mission, and we fully understand that mission plus our individual strength, then we have confidence, which fosters the building block C of trust and respect. When I was in Georgia and in leadership, I had gained respect and trust. But this was after years and years of supporting my team and building relationships until this day that will last a lifetime. When I first got to DC, I was never approached and sprayed with so many misconceptions about the agency and the way 911 works. I did not get on the defense, nor did I decide these people were not worth my time because of the negativity coming from their spaces. No. I knew it was because they were not intimately aware of the agency and our doings. So I made it a goal of myself to attend every community meeting I could and do a comm center one-on-one course in any time that they allotted me. In my first year, I attended 80 community meetings. Some of them were with my team. Some of them were alone. Some of them, the only team I had was my 9-year-old son, who brought a book bag and homework with him. This does not solve every problem, but I know it has helped many residents in the district understand how 911 and 311 works and how we are there to help them. We answer the call. Not only did I go out of my way to build trust with external stakeholders, I also saw that we had some internal trust issues. I was blessed that when I was given a token of respect walking in the doors of OUC because I had come up the ranks of 911. Yet I was still an outsider. To be realistic, I knew I could not create a single personal bond with hundreds of employees here at the agency. So I created surrogate relationships. Those relationships I could not personally nurture. I focused on making sure I had healthy relationship with my direct reports, my chiefs, who I made sure they had healthy relationships with their managers under them, who then created relationships with their teams, and so on and so on. In this way, you as a leader can have extensions throughout your organization that represent you and are fully knowledgeable of the agency and the mission. Lastly, proper governance. Every 2 years, my agency creates a 2-year strategic plan. In this plan, we dissect and review all that's working and anything that is not aligning to the mission of the agency. This is important to keep your hands in as a leader when you're moving change. All the philosophical points we touched on earlier means nothing if the agency is misbudgeting or have a group of outdated SOPs in place and the employees are having to attach Band-Aids, ad hoc procedures to fill in the holes. As a transformational leader, you must realize this type of change has to be holistic. Many changes can fail if you as a leader fail to clean up the underbelly of your organization. That will happen if you're out of touch with the overall agency operations. Basically, the agency can be nice, glamorous with makeup, but what does it look like when it goes home and gets ready for bed? All the glamour is stripped away. That's the bones of your agency, the governance. And you want that to be just as tight as everything else. Do you know what sunk costs are? Sunk costs are spending money and time on something to go down the line and found out that it is counterproductive or ineffective. But instead of relieving the program, a contract, you still push it through. When I walked in one of my agencies, I had a company that was supposed to be doing work for us for years, soaking up money. Now, it was not entirely their fault. My team could have done better. They could have been more proactive. But after looking over the project, what was needed, I quickly identified that we within the agency already had enough expertise to handle the project. So I killed the contract, drafted up a plan for the project, assigned project owners from my leadership team, got buy-in and participation from our labor, and voila, the project was done within a year, and we saved enough money to divert it to something more meaningful. That's governance. In conclusion, we are in the middle of an earth-sized emergency. Social discord, the industry is focused with praise and attacks. Not only are we facing things we have not been able to fully grasp, we are also facing scarce resources, personal trials, emotions are heightened, and we must keep it all together. Basically, what I'm saying is you are already involuntarily in a transformative leadership position. I will not stand here and tell you that we got it all figured out. I know none of us do. In no agency, no city, no state, no country, nor continent, period. This was one that was a complete knockout. COVID has changed our lives so much, there is no need for me to add any narrative here. You already know. But not only is this thing taking a toll on us, it is emphasized with the long brewing social and racial justice we so need to acknowledge and tackle, alongside a once-in-a-lifetime presidential race. This is even more strenuous for us in the profession because we are now faced with large-scale protests and unrest. That might not be too unique to DC because living here and working here is quite frankly like drinking out of a fire hose. But it is unique to have all states touched by this at the same time. Now, this is the baby of them all. But we must acknowledge next generation 911 is on our shoulders. The need, the support, and the lack of thereof, and the uncertainties that come with NG 911. All this, and we are merely secretaries in the eyes of OMB, but I won't go there. But shout out to all the states that are moving the needle and having their ECC superstars classified as public safety first responders. Okay, back to COVID. How does a leader balance it all? You don't. You pick the important pieces, you tackle them in order of priority and doability. So this is how I handled COVID, or I should change this and say, this is how I handled 2020. These are the facts in best order that I remember them. DC entered phase 1 quarantine in March. Blur. One of my 311 call takers passed. Blur. My 311 chief of ops passed unexpectedly. Blur. George Floyd was murdered. Blur. Our president, without warning, brought to St. John Church in the middle of protests. Blur. Social media battles. Blur. Kamala. Blur. One of my 911 dispatchers passed. Blur. 200,000 deaths in the United States and millions of COVID infections. Blur. First presidential debate. Blur. And then a 911 semi-nationwide outage. Blur. Now, of course, much has happened since the onset and during those blur moments for me. But honestly, I would have that exact recollection was it not for the wonderful groups of individuals that got my back and who work at and work hard for a DC OUC. My team helped fill in those blurs. We were able to have a relatively low infection rate in our agency. We were able to split our 400 employees between 4 spots to honor social distancing, our main center, our backup center, Thor, our mobile PSAP, and teleworking. We had time to implement a succession plan, which basically mapped out what would happen if one of our divisions went down, say IT, 911, 311, transcription, admin training. So we cross-trained a surge of employees to do each other's jobs. And yes, it has been implemented. We consistently do temp checks. I gave a break on the director for an additional 15 minutes per shift for everyone, because we all need to make those calls now at home. We all need to check in on loved ones or just take a breather. We were even able to harness some outside DC government employees who were teleworking and had normally face-to-face job duties. And we were able to train them virtually and get them to help out on 311, whose call volume was peaking. That's governance. As a leader, I stayed in constant contact with my industry support teams, APCO, MENA, FirstNet, Metropolitan Washington's COG, NASNA. Those are relationships. Our industry is not just 911 anymore. We are morphing, so you and your teams must stay sharp. While you are bettering the agency, you also have to stop worrying about if they like you or if they like what you're saying. Just make sure you remember the above points and always be honest and true to yourself. That's individual growth. Basically, in transforming an agency, an idea, a product, or a process, timing is also important. Knowing when to push, when to pause is also key. As a leader, you must know your mission, yourself, your support, lack thereof, and the agency's bones, the governance structure. And remember, you have a right to be here. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Ricardo.
All right, yeah, very well done. That was excellent, and I almost fell to the side there. let me bring down your PowerPoint here and have you right up here. If you move your PowerPoint off to the side, you'll be able to see the comments right now, and they're just exploding. That was
wow.
Amazing. Well done. Thank you so much again. Again, it's an honor to have you here. You know, we've spoken a few times. I had the privilege and honor to go and meet with you, have you on an episode of the podcast, as well as have some of your assets, which I love. The fact that Leah was listening as well. We were saying the same thing. Love how you don't say employees or anything. You say your assets. That is huge right there. And that is, thank you. I don't know what else.
Thank you.
So good. Yeah, as you can see right there, you know, the comments are just coming in, just exploding right there. So that was amazing. So it looks like some people are asking if they're able to get the PowerPoint as well.
Yes, we can share that with you. No problem. Yep, I'll make sure I get it to you, Ricardo, and you can get it out to the attendees.
All right, excellent. So it looks like a question actually just popped in literally just now. So we got someone here saying, so a basic question, should a director want to be responsible for employee happiness?
Definitely. I think so. When I first walked into actually both the agencies I worked at and the agency I left, morale is huge. And so one of the things that I did in DC, because it's such a large agency and I wasn't able to be as intimate as I wanted. My first maybe 2 or 3 months here, I did a chat with the director. And so I allotted 4 days that I literally came in this building and worked about 12 hours, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a Monday. And I met with any employee that wanted to talk to me and just harnessing on what they were giving me that would help make them happy. I was able to implement different plans and programs that were also key for the agency, but it also helped with employee morale.
All right. Excellent. Let me go back into this question here. All right. There we go. Again, thank you so much. This was excellent to have you on here as always to talk to you. And I will make sure for all of you who are watching right now, I will get that PowerPoint. And what I'm going to do is on the website, I will add a downloadable link and add the PowerPoint there so that people will be able to download it from there. So
sounds good.
Again, an honor to have you. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Have a good one.